Welcome back, everybody, to The Climb, the StarCraft 2 podcast focused on the below masters, blue collar leagues. I am your host, Will, aka Lord Cranial.
Hello, my name is Dan. I go by Captain Hoppa. Each episode, we will dive into the ups and downs of the Diamond Ladder experience while searching for the secrets to get good.
Yeah, we're just two normal players who are looking to climb to that next rung of the ladder, trying to get our way to masters and grandmasters, just like many of you. Today's topic is going to be a little bit retro. We're going to take a trip down memory lane as we discuss what we did and through like bronze through platinum. We're super excited to be talking about this discussion. But before we dive in today, I have a question for you, Dan. How is the ladder going for you?
It's going pretty good. It's okay. I don't know, man. It's a mixed bag, as it always is, I feel like. Um, I think in general, I've been playing a lot better. Like, I feel like a lot of the things I had before the break have returned. Just awareness and ability to make decisions. But then there's still like random off days or random like I feel like I'm taking crazy pill kind of days. And I think the thing that's really standing out is the session I had yesterday, which was like it was okay, but I was also like every every game I lost from my own self being impatient, right? Like my my own reactivity was reacting too much, and I was trying to like I did a lot of plays where like I tried to like ride my momentum out, and I'm like, oh, we could just keep going, let's go. And then once I commit to that, I'm just like, well, I wish that just didn't happen. Like, I could have kept playing this game, but it did, and I am the one responsible for it, so I will have to live with this choice. And it's I think it's a bummer too, because like this is part of just being aggressive sometimes, is that for every time you YOLO in and win a game off of it, you're gonna YOLO in and get shut down so hard sometimes, right? And I think the patience is really important for figuring out when it's the right call and when it's a questionable call, right? And I think it's one of these things too where it's like I just need to like stop myself. Even though I know it's a good time to attack, I need to just like send like one ling up the ramp before I before I commit my entire army up, because I just kept doing it. And like again, based on the situation, it wasn't necessarily the worst call, but based on any other factors, it just didn't work out, and you kind of you kind of just hit a brick wall, and I lose 60 supply, and then I'm like, well, I just put myself in a terrible position. Time to try to play it out, But yeah, I don't know. That was most of my session yesterday, so that's really fresh in my mind. But again, it's I feel like things are smoothing out at least a little bit.
Oh, that's good to hear. Whenever you were starting to talk about impatience, I'm like, oh God, we're gonna have the same ladder update, aren't we? But yeah, I'm glad to hear that you're like you're getting back into it. The rust is finally kind of flaking off for you. Um, As for the impatience part, I can definitely understand that as somebody who also likes to try and be a bit aggressive, especially in like TVZ or TVP, someone who wants to set the tempo for the rest of the match. And it can be really easy to, win one fight, think, "Oh, this is the greatest thing ever," and then lose 5 games after that because you have that same like audacity to push into some like horrific tank line or a bunch of colossi or something like that. But I am glad to see that you're starting to climb back up a little bit. I noticed that you actually did climb like back up a decent amount. You're like 3.8k again or something like that.
Yeah, I'm in that ballpark, more so than the 3.6 ballpark, which I was kind of bouncing around in for a little bit. I mean, hey, it's not the first time I've been 3.6, and it probably won't be the last. And I've said this many times, but like I've been 3.6 so many times, but every time I've been 3.6, I've been like objectively better. It's just, it's kind of piecing it all together. Um, and well, there was one thing I was going to say. Oh yeah, I find myself losing ZVTs in the same way over and over again where this was part of me kind of messing around with Lingbane Hydra a little bit too. But like I can take great engagements, I can take great fights, but then I do nothing to leverage that position into anything more meaningful, right? And for me as a Zerg who's making Lings and Banes and all this, it's like I win a couple fights. I feel like I'm in a great spot, and then my follow up is to make a lot more Ling Bane and keep and keep trying. But
Hmm.
in reality, you have to just be like, okay, let's get 15 more drones. Let's get a infestation pit. Let's get hive tech, and then we'll close this game out easy peasy. Like it won't even be like stressful if you do all those steps. But again, my unit unit heaviness is just not it's not helpful. It's not helpful on a Terran who's landing a fourth base and just getting more and more fortified and will be defensive because they are lacking a large army, and it's like I think I need to just take some time and kind of feel that out. But it's funny because there's part of me that's a little relieved when I when I when I lose the games in the same way over and over again, it's kind of nice because I'm like, oh, I just need to not do this one thing every time. So sometimes it's nice when like you get the refreshing ability to be like, oh, it's just this one thing that I've repeated over and over again, because I'm like, that's a relatively easy change, but you still got to make it.
Yeah, a lot of the times the proper Terran response to that is it's essentially like the hot plate scenario where you touch it and it's just like, oh, hot, not doing that again. Um, I tend to not be that person. I'm just like, oh, it's hot. We'll try it again. It's still hot. It's still hot. Oh, and I've burnt my fingers now. Um, but yeah, it I feel like it is kind of a tricky dance in ZVT if you're going to play Ling Bane because you do have to apply the proper amount of pressure and make sure that you're deflecting any pressure that the Terran can send your way. So it's a tricky dance for sure.
Yeah, and it's just such a different thing, and it's also like if I lose like two ZVTs in a row from like losing my fourth base and being out of position, I'm like, yeah, that's a major like losing the fourth base is a major objective for the Terran, or killing the fourth base is a major objective for the Terran, and it's like you gotta hang on to that, and I just don't have those priorities nailed out as I do in certain other game situations probably, but um, a learning experience, like anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, how much uh, how much different is it from Roach Ravager for you personally?
Um, so the thing about Roach Ravager, I mean, I love it. It's very fun, but you operate on certain windows of attack, right? And I have certain windows to do a lot of damage, right? And those windows can be extended or shortened based on many different things within the game, but I still depend on that one power spike where I'm at like 170 supply and my opponent is at, like 120, 110-ish or something like that. Like that's the big window, and the choices that you make within that are very important and very um it's rigid in a way, right? But it's also really fun. Like there's different ways you can kind of go about using that window, and also just based on the choices that your opponent has made as well. And honestly, I feel really good about navigating that and navigating, like third base defensive setups and how to abuse him unsieging his tanks and stuff like that. But it's different, right? Whereas
Yeah,
Hydraling Bane is also just uh, like you're just trying to drone as hard as you can, as much droning as you can get away with while still being safe, right?
yeah,
And a
for
lot of
sure.
it is you are waiting. You're waiting for the Hellions, right? You're waiting for the first tank push. You're waiting for the second tank push. And it's your job as the Zerg to just be ready and be prepared and be aware, right? Because every Zerg has lost a game where they just blink their eyes and like four tanks are at their base and they're like, oh well, yeah, I'm dead. like that's it. And it's like I had to have seen that coming. If I saw it coming, or if I saw him when he left his base, it's no problem. but if you don't see it, you just kind of die. And the other thing I'll say about Hydralink Bane is that it's very inject and creep tumor focused because those are very uh, those are very necessary things that you need to survive and to produce, right?
Right.
So it's different. The thing I don't like about Hydrabane as a stylistic thing is that I don't like that waiting around for the Terran to attack you kind of thing. I like to be in the driver's seat and I like to have that kind of control. And with Roach Ravager, you have a little bit more of that. There's still early game stuff where you have to be a little bit more aware of the Hellion Dive or whatever it is. But once you get to that power spike, it's like you have a lot of freedom during that phase on how you want to apply pressure.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
fun. It's fun. You get to blow stuff up.
So, you did mention that you can be caught off guard pretty easily by certain tank pushes. Whenever we played our games, whenever you were going back to your experimentation with Hydraling Bane, I noticed that your creep spread was actually pretty damn good. And usually you had a decent idea of where I was on the map. So, uh, I guess is it because the Terrans are just like clearing your creep better? Is it because you're focusing on other things so you don't get that chance to spread that creep? Like what's causing the lack of vision?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That tank example wasn't really like a specific example. It's just
Oh,
something.
okay. Okay.
It wasn't a specific game, but like it still happens. Occasionally it's that surprise siege up, and you're just like, well,
Yeah.
I'm dead. I don't think that has happened to me recently, but I definitely know the feeling of like, holy shit, he's here.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
it's not a
you
fun.
you as a Terran too, if you wedge your tanks into a good position, you already know. Even if you get cleaned up, like you already know, just getting to that position is such an accomplishment, and it's already going to set up the trades just fantastically, you know. Um, and I think the other thing too is that I can be doing great with creep tumors and overlord vision and Hellion zoning, but if I'm getting supply blocked and I'm not able to constantly make drones during that, it's kind of not as great. And that's,
Hmm.
it's the challenge. That's always the challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely tell you that it does feel nice to get into that really nice setup, but there is a scary moment where you're thinking, if I don't know where his army is, he could probably just surround and kill me at the same time. Like there are some really nice tank positions on the current map pool where that's not really that much of a possibility. Like Beckett comes to mind for sure, but there, yeah, I mean, it feels really nice. Don't get me wrong, but there's still that kind of like
Yeah.
lurking thought in my head, just like I could get surrounded here
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think every Terran has that like uneasiness. Like there's like an internal
at
timer in their head.
at all
Like
times.
I've been on creep and it just like it ticks down how long you've been on creep. And it's just a matter of time. If you spend enough time there, eventually there's going to be things collapsing in on you. And, um, you know, it
Yeah,
happens. It's classic.
yeah. Yeah, it really is. Anything about ZVP or ZVZ? Have you kind of fixed what was going on with your ZVZ?
Not really. I mean, like ZVZ, like here's the thing. I used to really embrace the chaos of ZVZ and thrive in it. But now I feel like the chaos is just like I just don't know what to do because like I still open the same way, but like I just don't know if I should keep opening this way or just give it up and be more concerned. Excuse me. Um, like excuse me one second.
It's all good.
Um, I don't know if I should be more defensive and like chill and just try to drone up. Because I always make Ling Banes to pressure, right? And what's been happening is that either I run into someone who knows how to make a Baneling nest and how to defend with Ling Bane, and I get nothing done and fall behind, or they're being super greedy and I just kill them, right? It's very rare that I get one that's like in between where I'm like, okay, I did a little damage, but like it's still even. Like either I'm putting myself behind or I'm winning the game. So I don't know how to strike that balance. I think I might just try to like be like the more boring like macro drone up version just to like see what happens because I'm never on that side of that interaction. I'm always the guy who's running across, and sometimes you run into the guy who's doing the same thing you are, and then it just gets weird and more weird, and then um, you're really just like searching for like an ability to see where you are in the game, and you're just kind of randomly guessing, and it's rough. And I don't know, man. I'm just probably gonna keep doing what I'm doing and maybe experiment a little bit. But so much of ZVZ is just like understanding that you're in a weird situation and trying to navigate your way out of it. And it's challenging.
It's kind of funny that you say that because it almost seems like you're kind of embracing the chaos that is the game that is the game of ZVZ. Whereas, every time I ladder Zerg and I face another Zerg off on ladder, it's just like, this is chaos. I don't understand what's happening. But
Yeah,
yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with experimenting with different styles and trying to be on the other side of the aggression. I feel like it could be a really nice learning experience. Probably could, net you some wins if who knows.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, we'll see. Again, it's just I still enjoy ZVZ a lot, but it's I just feel like like recently I've just been getting the short end of the stick, right? Where weird shit happens, then I'm like, oh, I guess I'm the one who's behind in this in this weird one, and then yeah, but whatever.
It happens. Any thoughts on facing off against Protoss on ladder?
Not really. I feel like I haven't been running into as many Protosses recently, which I know is like kind of insane to say in the year of 2021. Um, but yeah, I just haven't been running into them. If they open Stargate, I'm actually, I don't remember if I said this last time, but I'm actually more comfortable when they open Stargate these days because I know exactly what I'm going to do. My plan is crystal clear to the finish line if they open that way. If they don't, it's a little more questionable, but I still feel pretty good about dealing with it. And yeah, I queen walk or I die.
So you would say you're pretty comfortable with the treading the waters versus Protoss currently?
Yeah, I mean it's fine, and I feel fine given the choices that I'm going to make, and I feel like a lot of Protosses make a lot of very similar choices these days as well. Like it's very, the third base timing's all the same. The first few gateway units and Stargate units is pretty the same, and I still I still get like floored. Like my jaw drops if they make an Oracle first these days. I'm just like, whoa, what? There's another unit out of the Stargate. Like like I seriously like, it throws off my timing so much. And it used to be the standard, right? Everyone used to open with an Oracle or something, and like
Mhm.
335 spores and you're fine. And I always delay my spores now because it's always a void ray. But then if it's an Oracle, I'm like, my spores my spores are late because I just forgot what to do versus this.
Well, it is good to hear that you're starting to stabilize here with ZVP and being able to handle the era of the void ray, I should say. Do you have any lowlights or highlights to share with us today?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Um, oh yeah. Okay, I'll start with the low light. It's not a very long game, but um, this happened just yesterday, so it's very fresh in my mind. And okay, so here's what happened. We were on Yaganantha, and it's a normal opener for me. I did not 12 pool on this game. I think maybe by accident because I was talking to my stream or something, and that happens, and then I'm like, okay, well, it's a hatch first, whatever, it's fine. Like it doesn't bother me that much, but usually I would 12 pool on that map because I enjoy the 12 pool on that map. I think it's good. Um, so anyways, I'm opening regularly. I'm sending the overlord down in front. I see the probe coming in my base, right? And the probe goes into the shadow in between my two bases and disappears and does not emerge on the other side, right? So instantly I'm like, oh, it's this. So I pull like six drones. I go to the ramp. I'm expecting to see the three pylon wall off, because if they linger in that area, that's like 90% of the time that's what it is, or they're just like pausing it for no reason, which also can happen. But anyways, I'm expecting a three pylon wall. I pull the six drones immediately. Like my instincts were right there because I have played this game before, and so I pull the drones immediately. There's nothing there. I go, oh, okay, I guess it was just fake or whatever. And then, but I'm still like, I haven't seen the probe. So then I send another drone from that group. I put back to mining, and then I send another drone to search that like that southern part of the fog outside your base, and I don't see the probe. And I'm like, I guess I'm going insane, and I guess I overreacted to nothing. And then in about 8 seconds later, my gas geyser finishes on the north side, and there's a pylon done in the top corner. And I'm like, oh my god, I knew it. I knew the probe was hidden. I knew the probe was sneaky, but I just did not even think to look north up in that top corner by the geyser. Like it did not cross my mind 1 second. And as soon as I was like, "Oh man, I guess I overreacted," I hear it, and I'm just yeah. And then we're doing the high ground, low ground dance, and I'm already behind because the first pylon's done, right? And you can use that first pylon to anchor the low ground, and then I couldn't deny anything on the low ground, and then I'm just like, all right, I'll give it to him.
Yeah,
But
you never trust a probe that you can't see.
yeah, and I think the most annoying thing is that I knew that probe was being suspicious. I just completely missed it on a technicality. Like I didn't think to look up. It's like I knew the spots. I knew what people do on that map, but I just forgot that you could do it up there. And again, if I see that pylon when it's building, I just my warrior drones come out and they shut it down, no problem, and I'm very comfortable with that. But if I see it that late, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, it really is. Do you do you not send a drone after it?
So not all the time. If they're being really suspicious or doing like really annoying stuff, I will. It's more about I check the dark spots for buildings, and that's the thing that confirms it, right? And I'm not. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm paranoid about probes in my base, but I also know that like you don't want to overreact too much to it, but you also have to just keep an eye on him. And a lot of it too with Zerg is using your second overlord to kind of follow the probe. So if the probe like wants to hang out by the ramp, you hover over to the ramp. If he's hanging out behind your base, you kind of hover over there. But again, I just didn't check that. I didn't know. I didn't know that was a spot.
Yeah,
And
in fairness to you, that's a weird spot. That is a weird spot.
yeah, and it's just funny because again, one of the things that I think really helps for understanding beating cannon rushes is just knowing the spots. Because if you know the pockets, it's so easy to just say, okay, I'm gonna put a drone that patrols here, and like he can never put a cannon down.
Yep.
And if you know those spots, it's so much easier. And so I encourage I encourage people who are dying to cannon rushes to just look at the sequence of buildings from your opponents, because if they know what they're doing and they're like a seasoned cannoneer, they will have a plan to it and they will have a structure to it. And knowing that structure actually just makes your life so easy because you can be like, all right, we're just gonna patrol some guys here and then fight, and then he's gonna have to micro his heart out to keep the probe alive, and then it's not too bad.
As someone who is a dirty cannon rusher, whenever they play Protoss, I can 100% confirm that if you know the spots and you're patrolling workers in there, I'm gonna have a very hard time doing anything. It's no joke. Like if you know the spots and you can patrol a worker in there, I have to either like come up with another spot on the fly, or I have to abandon it completely and go to plan B, whatever that is. Um, but yeah, having your cannon rush defense polished up is it's surprisingly important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is just one that got the better of me. I think the most painful part about this is that I my instincts, my spider sense for cannon rushed, it went off, but then it was just inconclusive. But my like because again, in those situations, noticing it when it first starts and reacting to it quickly can win you the game. But I just still missed it, man. It was just in a different spot.
It happens to the best of us. Sometimes it just slips by you. I
Yeah.
What about that highlight?
Okay, highlight. Okay, I played some custom games with the helium rabbit, and she's a very very strong Protoss, and we were on Oxine. She opened Stargate. We did a nice queen walk as you do, 38 drone, 2 gas special, and the thing that I think went the best for me is that I executed the queen walk pretty. I mean, pretty good. Like I'm happy with how I executed it, but we did a really good job on the follow up. Probably the best like follow up macroing I've ever done on the queen walk, and we were able to enter the mid game in a phenomenal position. And it was one of those where I could tell I was going to get the third, like no problems, right? And I also know that Oxide sucks for pushing the ramp, right? Pushing up that natural ramp on Oxide is the worst, especially with queens. So as I was killing the third, before the third even died, I was macroing, I was making queens, I was making a layer, and I was droning, and I was spending my typical, like 1700 mineral bank that I usually get during that push, and I was spending it very nicely and efficiently, and um, we had a great position. The queens even survived for the most part, which is great. So after that, I macro up. I take my 6 gases, 3 base saturation. I hit with like plus like 1/1 carapace or carapace ranged, Hydra, Queen, Ravager, and we just smashed in, and it was very it was wonderful.
Wow. So we have a we have a Captain Hap victory over Helium Bunny.
Yeah, I mean any victory over Helium Bunny, I tend to celebrate. But this one, it felt really clean. Like it felt like the uh, the execution on both fronts was there because a lot of times, uh, you execute the queen walk really well, but your follow up's bad, or like the follow is bad because the queen walk is good, and it can go either way. But I felt like it was really clean and good times, good times.
Yeah, that's really impressive, dude. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Uh, uh, what would you say? What would you say kind of brought you to victory in that game? Like, I know you said that there was a very clean execution, but what in particular do you feel like was clean about it?
So I'll tell you the things that I usually die to from like a queen walk that's good, like a queen walk where I do a lot of damage, but I do not do any macro at home. What tends to happen is I will get a 1.8k bank of minerals. I will have not very many drones on my third, and I will typically have no queens at home. So I have no injects, and I also, because I'm desperate for queens, I tend to not get a layer in those situations as well. So one of the first things I did during the pivot is I started 3 queens, uh, and I started a layer as soon as I could. And having a late layer and a low drone count, even if you do drone that third really fast, if you don't have a layer, you really don't have any ability to fight with meaningful like gas units, right? You can like keep making queens and keep making Roach Ravager, but like if there's like 18 voids, you kind of want something else ideally. So getting that layer is a big part of it, but it's also a lot of times during the queen walk, I am committed to that attack, right? So I am very focused on it, and I'm trying to either flood lings as a reinforce, so I'm dumping my minerals into lings. But at a certain point, you need to say, do I need to make more lings or do I need to start droning, right? And that's one of the things Lambo says in like his build order breakdown is that um, there's a lot to do at home as you're doing it, which is why it's a little bit more of an advanced build, at least on that front. Like the actual execution of it is not that bad, but if you blink your eyes, you will easily float over 1500. And I mean, I'm sure I was floating a lot, but it was so much smoother because I was able to get injects off better, and I was able to get a layer in a timely manner. And then from there it's just double upgrades, more drones, and just keep making enough stuff.
It's funny that you say it seems kind of like an intermediary build because like that was one of my tripping points whenever I was first learning the 211 is, I would finally get the dropout on time and I'm like, going across the map and doing some damage. And, after I'm done, messing around with the 16 Marines, I look back at my base. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm floating about 1.5k. I don't have a third base. I don't have my third barracks. I haven't started upgrades. So this is a travesty. And then I kind of got salty, and I was just like, I don't understand why I'm losing this. Like, look at how much damage I got done with the 16 Marines. And then it's just like,
Yeah,
well, they macroed behind it, and you didn't, so you're dead.
yeah. Well, and it's like, look how good I executed my opener. It's like, well, yeah, like you did a great job with that, but the game keeps going after those two medevacs come out, you know?
Yes,
And I think I think that's very common too, because it's like my execution on getting those two medevacs was beautiful, but there's still a whole nother game there. And like that's one of the reasons I actually don't mind doing the queen walk all the time. I feel like I talk about the queen walk because it's the only build I do in CVP for the most part. But the reason I like doing it so much is because as soon as my attack starts, I have so much to macro while I'm attacking that like doing that kind of multitasking for me, I think is still really helpful. And the fact that I can even begin to spend the amount of money I'm floating is great. And I still got a ways to go, so I'm probably going to keep doing it because there's literally so much room for improvement with that build that I can continue to refine it. And it's not that boring for me. There's just more ways to refine it, you know?
yeah. I mean, it is a fantastic build that can really punish greedy Protoss players hard. So yeah, I would say keep at it, and keep learning all the intricacies. Make sure your follow ups crisp. But yeah, I'm happy for your victory against Helium Bunny. I'm happy to hear that your ladder sessions have been going better recently, and I hope you continue to have success. Let's go ahead and hit 4K.
Thanks, buddy. Work in progress. Work in progress. I like
Work in
like always.
progress.
All right. Well, how are you doing, man? How's your ladder going?
My ladder sessions are going. They're going okay, I would say. I'm still struggling just a little bit to get into kind of a consistent flow with my practice schedule. Um,
Hmm.
I've finally kind of gotten back into it, this weekend, and managed to crank out a ton of games. But I mean, for the most part, it's not too bad. There's been some weird craziness on the ladder recently, though. Like, good lord, some of these people are doing the weirdest things, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. Sometimes
yeah,
the air changes and it brings out the wackiness. I know what you mean.
yeah. It's like the Mercury in retrograde meme, where it's just like, oh yeah, it's a full moon, so the crazy, like all the craziness is going to come out tonight.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for sure.
it really hasn't been too bad. I've been still feeling a little bit stiff with in particular my engagements, just trying to like move my units around in an appropriate manner. Like my macro doesn't feel too far off from what it usually is. It's just getting my units to do what I want them to do.
Yeah. And is that just like an experience thing, you think, or you think it's just is it a patience thing like like we were talking about earlier, or hard to say?
It's yeah, I don't know. It's more so just kind of a muscle memory thing. Like I
Yeah.
used to, it still hasn't quite come back yet. Over the past couple of days, I've been feeling a little bit better about it, and I've been, doing the things that I need to do in like the mid and late game to, preserve my units and make sure that I come out of an engagement on top. But um, yeah, it's usually simple stuff like clicking the right unit on a command card, or clicking the right places on the mini map. I've also still had that issue where I keep clicking on the mini map by mistake, and my units will like I want them to kind of like move back a little bit, and like, oh, you meant move forward to the enemy's
Yeah.
base.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep, we're
Yeah.
going. But
Yeah.
it's just little stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I also think sometimes it's hard to focus on everything that is important, or like you fix one problem and then you're like, all right, hey, my macro's in a better spot. That's great. And then it's like, okay, well, time to move on to the next thing that's pretty abysmal, or just it's also like you kind of you can like free yourself. Once you get certain things automated, you can free yourself to be like, okay, we can devote a little more attention to the pre-split or to the setup and just making sure it's a little bit nicer and a little bit more, meticulous or something like that. And yeah, I've run into those problems all the time where it's like a prioritization thing, and I'm like really trying to prioritize something else, and then something I used to do very, very well and very cleanly just goes out the window because, uh, yeah, I've definitely fought you where you had some really nice pre-splits, and it looks enticing as a Zerg, and I'm like, oh, I can take this, and then you're like, wait, no, I can't, and then the mines have already gone off, and you're like, yeah, yep,
There's also a moment where it's just like, good lord, how long is this siege tank line? It keeps going. He
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
falls back to the next one. But yeah, it's just a muscle memory thing. I mean, as I get back into a more consistent practice schedule, like that's all of that stuff's going to come back. And it has already started to come back, so I'm not trying to stress it too much.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Um, and so like, could you give me an example of like some of the weird stuff you've been seeing? Or I don't know if that's in the next bit, but
Oh boy.
up to you. Up to you. You can handle
I'll
that how you want.
I'll give a couple of examples. I had one Zerg who put a proxy hatchery in my base, which, I proceeded to, get rid of. And this is okay. So there have been two proxy hatches like within 2 or 3 days of each other, which is bizarre to me. But one of them put it in my base. So I send, 6 SCVs to go kill it as well as the Reaper. Um, Only to start sending the Reaper out after it's dead and noticing that there's another proxy hatch in front of my natural. So I'm just like,
Oh.
I don't understand what the hell is happening. So, I start to kind of poke away at it and they cancel it and they go and they steal one of my third base's gases. So I'm like, I don't know. What the hell are you doing? And as the game progresses, they mass expanded to 6 bases and then rushed a Spire to try and deal with, my, mid game push and made corruptors with a couple of Mutalisk. So I'm just
Mm,
I was bewildered. I was watching the replay and I know what they were trying to do. What they were trying to do is make sure that that proxy hatch was hidden, like the first one, because they made a
yeah.
roach warren and they were just going to like pump roaches into my base from the hidden location. And I was
Yeah.
just like,
It's
there's
the
no way this works.
yeah, it's the distraction proxy hatch to hide the other proxy hatch.
Yeah, but I've been proxy void rated. I've had Terrans do some of the weirdest things that I've seen recently. I've played a couple
Mm,
of really weird TVTs, but it is just it's just bizarre out there recently. I don't know what the deal is.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, some days the ladder just decides to be really weird at you, and it, it's a very strange feeling because again, it's also like you have no control over it, and you're just like, well, this is the situation I'm in. I think I might have seen some of that game because I remember watching a game you were playing where the third base gas geyser was taken, and I'm like, I wonder how that happened. Like I came in later. I
Where?
came in later,
Yeah,
and I was like, that's an interesting choice. Like, how did a drone even get there? And I guess it's an extractor now.
yeah, yeah. The funny thing is that I know this is something that we've talked about before, but we're kind of like we tend to be set in our ways. Like we have particular builds that we want to do, and the moment that our plan diverts or it gets diverted, I should say, we start to kind of like panic and freak out. But I've actually been getting better about dealing with the panic because the ladder's been weird recently, which is really exciting to me. But also at the same time, I'm not sure if I'm succumbing to the madness yet.
No, I mean that's good. And honestly, that's an experience thing in my eyes, right? And it's like, uh, I think everyone has freaked out at something weird that your opponent is doing, right? I still do it all the time, but the more experience you have, the more you're like, okay, well, he's gonna do some weird shit, and I'm just gonna, play it safe. For me, it's just like, all right, we're gonna do two base saturation and maybe make some safety roaches, and Well, we'll see. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, and you just kind of you have at least some kind of plan, or you have at least like an ability to be like, hey, like what's the worst case scenario, right? Like what's the worst thing that could happen from this situation? Because a lot of times, like sometimes people just do weird shit just to be weird, and like if you take the bait in a way that's just like you do a bunch of weird stuff in response and just ruin your build, you're gonna have a bad time, right? But if you
Yeah.
just stay the course roughly, like maybe you still got to change a couple things depending on what it is, but you still have to just be okay with saying like, all right, my opponent has made some choices, and okay.
Yeah, the funny thing was about that game is that I saw like the six bases, but I noticed like half of them weren't droned up. I'm just like, I do not care now. You don't
Yeah,
have all of these bases droned. I know you don't have 100 workers. I don't really
yeah,
care.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's another thing too is that you're applying some pretty solid logic to those situations whereas a less experienced player might just be completely bamboozled, but you can be like, that's 900 minerals,
Yeah.
right? Like that's 900 minerals worth of hatcheries that isn't zerglings or drones. Like if you see that many hatches that early, you're like, yeah, he's got like 36 workers probably, right? Like,
Yeah, it's like
but hey,
you have there's no way you have the income to to supplement this.
yeah, yeah. Well, hey, that's good, and sometimes it's nice to be that guy who's doing normal stuff because you can just find yourself in a winning position sometimes just from existing in a way, like. Um, but hey, that's good. Do you have specific highlight and lowlights? Unless you have anything else you want to say generally.
No, yeah, believe it or not, that's not a highlight or a low light. So
It's just a game that
it's just a game.
it's just a game
Um,
that happened.
we can hop into the low light or the highlights and lowlights real quick. For my low light, it was a TVT on Romanticide, and uh, the Terrans have been wild recently. I don't know
Hmm.
what's going on, but um, they opened up with a 1-1-1 off of one base, and usually that's supposed to be a fairly aggressive build that contains your opponent on two bases or just like gets rid of your natural altogether. Um, but I scout it and like I'm trying to do a little bit of damage control, which I didn't do particularly well. I lost a lot of defending units, but we eventually do get it pushed back and we kind of get back on track with the normal build. Um, because I know that typically whenever they go for this one base aggression, like they want to continue to be aggressive throughout the game. So I send out a couple of Marines just to double check and make sure that nothing's coming my way. And he pushes out with like just tank Viking, a small number of it, but enough to make me a little bit worried. So I'm just like, oh god, we have one of these mech games coming up. All right, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of like setting my mind up for that, and push the uh, I push the tank Viking assault back, and I finally gather up enough where I feel comfortable like actually moving out on the map and trying to take out one of his bases. But um, opponent had other ideas, and then immediately started transitioning into mass BC Widowmine, which it's not the most annoying. I find Raven Widowmine the most annoying, but it's up there with some of the most annoying builds to deal
Yeah.
with. So I'm trying to transition into uh, a state where I can better handle battle cruisers and widow mines, but I didn't quite get the tech switch right. There's a lot of things that I could have done. But essentially, what winds up happening is that I just run into widow minefields over and over and over again. I hit, like hard points in their base over and over and over again. Like I could be hitting anywhere else and it would be better than, hitting this one base over and over and over. And in fact, like there are some points where there just weren't widow mines all over the field, and I could, move around freely, like trying to intercept them or trying to hit weaker points in their bases. But yeah, it was just kind of a disaster of a game. Like at some point, I just like lost too much, and they literally walked across the map with widow mines, burrowed them, killed everything, warped their BCs in, and the game was over.
Yeah, I've been there. I've lost many games to many Widowmine explosions, especially when it's like like when it starts, and then there's like 4 to 6 widow mines, it's like whatever. I can smash in here and get stuff done. And then it's fine. But then when it's like 10 widow mines, it it is so devastating and uh it hurts my soul sometimes. Like it just like because again, you don't think of the widow mine as like a good unit like by itself, like just like, oh, it's just a couple of mines. All right, whatever. But when they're all going off at the same time, like on the same spot, like, oh my God, it's so much damage. And for me in those situations too, the other thing that I always have in my mind is I do have this voice in my head that's like, we gotta get in there. We gotta blow something up. We gotta
Yep.
we gotta do something because if I let him sit at his, third base and take a fourth and a fifth and a sixth that are all gonna be planetaries, that are probably gonna have two planetaries, it's just gonna get harder and harder for me to break it. Um, and I totally know that feeling when you're like, I have to do something to stop this getting out of hand, but the only thing you can do is attack into the most fortified locations, like even if you pick the least fortified location, it's still one that has like 6 mines or something, and like you're gonna take losses, and sometimes I think it's just so hard to know how many losses are acceptable in those kind of games. um and the the other thing that always just breaks my heart in those is like I take a bad fight and then he immediately unsieges every mine he has and just goes across the map and I'm like, yeah, this is a good move.
Yep.
like yeah, I just lost 60 supply. This is a good move and I'm going to lose more supply.
See, yeah, this kind of goes into the like impatience that we were talking about earlier. It's like there was a genuine point where I could have broken him,
Yeah.
but I didn't reinforce correctly. So like at that point, I should have just been in it for the long haul. Like it's probably going to wind up being a 40-minute game, but like that's kind of my win condition at that point is not let, BCs just like warp into my base or, you
Yeah.
know, walk into my base and then warp on top of my other forces trying to get stuff done on the other side of the map, which is, something that happened. But there's also, I could be expanding more, I could be teching into better stuff like Ravens or my own battle cruisers or, you know, but, I decided not to do those things. I got impatient and just started, taking my hammer to his base and not getting much damage done.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that's a really hard decision to make in the game because for me too, I feel the same way. I'm a hammer guy, right? So like I have a hammer, I need to hit things with this hammer, and that's how I win games. Like it's very straightforward in that way, but it takes it takes a lot of executive decision making to be like, okay, let's put the hammer down for now, and we're gonna play this out the long way, right? Because when you're holding the hammer, you're just like, yeah, I'm looking for things to smash, and if it's a if it's a Terran who's never gonna leave his base, you're only gonna get as much as you're only gonna have a bad time trying to hit the stuff with that. And but it's so hard in the game to say, okay, I'm changing my whole like view of the game and my whole win condition for the game. I no longer am looking for things to smash. I am looking to play this out. Right. And it's so hard to make that. And I think a lot of times we try to make it after we've lost like 3 fights. And then it's like
Keep
then
trying to
it's
justify
already
it.
yeah, you've already put yourself too far behind sometimes, and it sucks, but it'll happen.
Yeah. Well, there's also just like the irritation with it because, when you start seeing that stuff on the ladder, you're just like, oh God, not this again. I want this game to end now. And it's just
Yeah,
like this not the right mindset to take about it. Honestly, it like sometimes you just got to settle in for the long haul. Like it's going to happen. I mean, you can cut your losses and just accept that like I'm going to lose 20 mmr, but that gives me an opportunity to play like 3 games or 3 more games in the time it would take to finish this one out. So
sure.
sometimes we could just give them the W. I mean, it really just it just depends. Like if you're really feeling that impatient, you might as well just like leave and then try to play more games.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add on that game?
No, I hate battle cruiser. What am I?
I wholeheartedly agree. All right, let's we'll go into the highlight.
Yeah, so I need to set this up with another low light. But
Sure.
so I played a TVP on Blackburn, and I got proxy void rated. But I correctly identified that it was going to be a proxy. I found the proxy location. My response just wasn't clean enough. Like I sent, like an SEV, a Reaper, and a Widowmine. I took out the pylon. But another probe just or an adept and a stalker came up. They killed, wiped everything, and probe just put the pylon down. And the void ray came like a few seconds later. My response wasn't quite clean enough, so I wound up losing. So I'm analyzing this game afterwards. I'm just like, okay, this is what we need to do. We knew that this was going to be a proxy void ray, but next time let's put a bunker down next to that Stargate. And if we can't find the Stargate, then we just go straight into 211. We bunker up and we get ready. The very next game, it was the same map, the same proxy void ray, the same position, just a different person. And I spot it. I'm just like, I know what I need to do right now. I slap a bunker down. I load it up. And actually, before I can even load it up or finish it, he just cancels the Stargate. Opponent just cancels the Stargate. I'm like, yes, this is what I'm looking for. Yes, I cancel the bunker like it's almost like a fu.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I sent my Reaper across to do some more reconnaissance and see what was going on in his base. I followed it up with a Widow Mine drop, and I got like I think it was like 9 worker kills off of that. I had a Reaper and a Hellion in both of his third base locations. I spread out some Marines to make sure that like there wasn't something that I just didn't see coming. And when I was sending the Marines out, I caught him trying to make a ninja base. So I killed that probe. Like, screw you. Um, I set up a tank push, and there's a really fantastic spot on Beckett if you can get it set up on that high ground where
Hmm.
if you have the tanks kind of like overlooking that ridge, you basically cut the third base off from the natural. I went in there like he had 2 colossi. I interference matrix both of them and just wiped the floor. I destroyed him, and
Nice.
I was so psyched about that because I shut down the proxy void ray and then just like shut this guy down.
I love that. I love that for you. And it's also just like um when you're like 2 steps ahead of your opponent in this game, it is the most satisfying thing imaginable. Like especially when they're trying to do cheeky stuff like that. Like the joy of finding a hidden base with one Zergling at the right time and just be like, oh, this is your play, huh? This is your play for getting it. Interesting, interesting. And then you can just like go over and quickly destroy it. It is so satisfying. And yeah, I mean, getting the jump on a build like that too is also just it saves you so much trouble and it saves you a lot of work, and it puts you in a good position for anything else that happens in the game. And oh, that's great. Good stuff. I,
Yeah,
I
I
also I
was
also love that it's rare that we get to enact the adjustments that we need to make instantaneously after it
yeah, it
happens.
really is. I would not have expected that I would get a redemption story arc right after that game. It was amazing. This like that was a it felt like a 1 in 1,000 chance.
Yeah, and it's also it helps the confidence a lot. Um, this happened to me recently too. I had a Protoss who he beat me. He did like I don't know, I forget what his opener was, but he basically did a Void Ray into Charge Lot, I think was the gist of it, but I misread it and I made too many links because I thought it was a stalker. I thought it was a stalker meme or something like that. Um, and then I played him again and he did the exact same build and I crushed him. And it's just like yeah, I looked at the replay when we played last and I made the adjustments and I was successful because I knew, like, I double checked to make sure he was doing the same build, but as soon as I scouted him I was like, oh, it's the exact same build. Sweet. I know exactly the changes to make. I'm gonna make less lings. I'm gonna make more roach, and I did. And I was prepared for the prism in the main. I had creep connecting my bases. It's like these little tiny things that weren't that big of a deal. I just did all of them, and it was so easy to shut it down. It's so satisfying.
Oh, absolutely. I actually have a similar story where I hit a Zerg who did a quick two base muta play. And like I wasn't expecting it. I scouted the spire too late. I got shut down pretty hard. I hit him again after, analyzing the replay and just being like, okay, so the spire went down at this time. I could have scouted all of these different things. I hit him again on ladder. Um, the person does the exact same build, but this time I decided, you know what, I'm going to be a little bit cheeky with this, and the opponent would like go after missile turrets and try to take them out very quickly, and then go after worker lines. So I put a missile turret and I put out a bait missile turret and then surrounded it with widow mines. And the mutas came in and they all immediately just it was just a massacre of mutalisk. It was amazing. And after that, like, you know, the opponent's plan was just kind of shut down. So I just kind of went across the map and killed them.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing how if you take away some of the anonymity and mystery behind some ladder opponents, you can realize that like in a best of three, you could shut them down pretty hard. They kind of rely on that trickery.
yeah. And having that foresight is actually, I think that's an incredible thing to have because it also shows your understanding of the game situation. And even if you just looked at that replay for 30 seconds and just been like, "Oh, okay, I get it." Like I get what his spiel is. Like I get what this does or whatever. And it's just funny cuz like you kind of feel like a god gamer when you pull stuff off like that and you're like, "Yeah, I made the adjustments. Yeah, I crushed it." And
Yeah.
I'm glad you were able to do that. It's a fantastic game and it feels good to shut down a Protoss like that. I totally get that.
Yeah, I was super excited by it. I can't even begin to describe how good that felt. But thank you very much.
Oh yeah, GG's. Good stuff.
GG's. All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and hop into our topic for tonight. And really, tonight, we're just going to talk about what we did in the early days. We're going to go back a little bit and talk about our experiences in bronze, silver, gold, platinum. What were we experiencing during those days? What took us to the next step, and what kind of got us here today? So, Dan, if you want to go ahead and start off, like, when? Well, I guess a better question is like, when did you start laddering?
So I started laddering. God, it's gonna be 4 years in February-ish. February is where I kind of draw the line. I think I laddered a little bit before that, like January-ish, but not very seriously and not very frequently. So we're three years and change at this point, and yeah, I mean, I think it's I've just been in a reflecting kind of mood, and like just thinking about it. I think I placed into bronze, but I was in bronze for like one game or maybe two games because like I look at my career report or whatever on BattleNet, and the first season I laddered, I was in bronze, but I think I played like two games. And then the immediate next season I was in silver, so I think I won like three games and got into silver. Um, I think the thing that stands out the most when I think about those games is how nervous and how much adrenaline I had during those games. Just the sheer exhilaration of it was a lot. Like I feeling my heart in my chest like beat when I see a probe come into my base. Like, and again, it's like it doesn't even have to be a cannon rushing probe, like a probe, and like a level of opponent interaction. I'm just like, oh God, what's happening? And like a lot of nerves and a lot of paranoia, and that's what really stands out for me in like the really early games. But I don't know. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, so I started around 2013 in Heart of the Swarm. I played a total of 49 games in Heart of the Swarm, so like basically chump change across 4 seasons. But yeah, I definitely relate to that. Like just like sitting down to start a ladder session was almost terrifying to me. Like my heart would start beating as well. And yeah, it was like it was such a new experience to me. Like it was like nothing I had ever, experienced before. And I was, baby cranial out here just like trying to learn hotkeys and stuff and moving the army around. It's like, oh, this is not the campaign. We're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely a wild experience from the start. I think I spent one season in bronze and then placed silver. And then I placed bronze again because I played like one game that season. But yeah, that's basically where I started out at.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. This is an approach I kind of got later on is that I realized that um, for me to practice is well I didn't have that much time to like ladder like weekdays, like I just didn't have the time, but I would practice build orders a lot. It's still something I do a lot, like just grinding it out in an AI game. I love the repetition of it, and I love the it's very in a vacuum in a way where it's like I just do my build and I just try to do my build better every time. And because the build is hard to do, there's always ways to ruin it, and there's always ways to make it a little bit better. Um, and it's a practice that I always did, but when I was in like gold, I would just practice my build order as best as I could, and then like ladder day would be like Saturday and Sunday, and like I'd be like, it's it's time to test the things that I've been practicing, right? Because I also know that like you can practice it as much as you want, but it's still gonna your opponent doing things is still gonna force you into situations, right? Um, so I would go into this latter day like it's game day, like the practice is done. It's time to face real people, and I think doing those build order games really helped me just also with confidence as well. Just being like, well, I have a plan. My plan is to make drones and make a lot of stuff. And uh, that's a pretty good plan in Gold League. Honestly, it's a better plan than a lot of other people in Gold League will have, and um, it's just I don't know, man. It was a whole experience, but it was also like getting some of those clean like macro wins where you just like have more stuff. I really miss that.
Yeah.
I miss how straightforward it was, where it's just like, yeah, this is the part of the game where I walk across and win because they have 33 workers.
Yeah, that kind of that feels kind of similar to my experience. It was just like I'm going to put together the biggest bio ball the ladder's ever seen, and then I'm going to a move across and kill my opponent. And usually it it worked fairly well because I'd get across the map and opponent would have 8 banelings and like 3 hydras. And it's just like I kill you now. But
Yeah,
I also wrote down I had a note. I wish I had remembered to actually pull this out, but I had a notebook filled with all of the like late Heart of the Swarm, early Legacy of the Void builds that is still somewhere around here. I gotta find it.
yeah.
But I would even have like little doodles in it whenever I was, actually studying it. I did spend a decent amount of time in empty customs just trying to learn the build order. At one point, I was trying to use like salt, which that just did not work for me at all. I hated salt.
That's a
Um,
that's a build order mod or something like that.
yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, salt is it basically tells you the build order in your head. Like you would upload like something from spawning tool, and the salt encoder would read it and just be like, okay, so at 10 supply you're going to make a supply depot, then at 11 it's going to be a barracks,
Yeah, yeah,
then
yeah.
on and on and on. And I hated that because one, as like a high silver leaguer, I there's something really annoying about it because I couldn't get the timings down perfectly.
Yeah.
But it kind of also made me feel a bit inflexible. you know it, it it could not have. My memories on that one were hazy, but I did spend a decent amount of time trying to practice build orders and getting them cemented in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also think sometimes like there's things like that that some people really love and some people really enjoy, and for other people it just won't do it. And you know, a lot of it is kind of experimentation and kind of seeing what works. And I also think sometimes it's like those things are good, but it's also like it also depends on you having something that is literally telling you what to do, right? Whereas when you're in a game, you are telling yourself what to do, right? Like you're that voice.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're that voice who's dictating the build and the choices within. And I think as a beginning player, like that's a voice you have to kind of cultivate on your own, you know, and you have to kind of get that. And here's the other thing I want to say is that the one thing I don't like in the community that happens sometimes is that a lot of times people who are starting out in the low leagues, they'll ask for advice and they'll be like, "Hey, how do I deal with this?" or "How do I get out of gold?" or something like that, you know? And I don't like the advice where it's just like just macro better. Uh, but here's the thing, that advice isn't wrong. Like just macro better is it's true. Like but I don't think that that's the way we need to say it to everybody in every
Yeah.
circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so dismissive and it's so just like I don't know. It doesn't solve anything. Like it doesn't give the person anything to work with. And I can't stand it when it's the boilerplate response for everyone who's trying to get better. So I really try to stay away from that. But at the end of the day, it's really there is a lot to be said about build order execution within Golden Plat. Like it is the true champion of those leagues, and um, there are still things you have to react to, especially more in Plat. But at the end of the day, it's still executing the build, and you know, I just wanted to straighten that out.
Yeah, that's something that annoys me too. Like, um, I remember when I was in Gold League, I would, every once in a while I would go on Reddit and ask for advice, just be like, hey, like, what can I do to get better? And you get the just macro better. And it's just like, yeah, sure. I don't know what to macro, like, what do you mean macro better? Like, am I not making enough SCVs? Is my build order garbage? Am I not making enough units? Do I have enough bases? Like, macro is a massive concept, and I don't think it's appropriate to, like, tell, like a gold league person just like macro better.
Yeah,
Which part of macro are you talking about? And the funny thing was, is that, like, at one point I got free coaching from a masters player who, he went in depth about the macro mistakes that I was making. Just like, all right, well, you don't have add-ons here, so we got to fix that. You're at a kind of low SCV count, so we're going to try and hit this number by this time. You could have more production buildings. He went over some really thoughtful macro advice, and I, like, immediately climbed to platinum after, just a couple of coaching sessions from him. So, I mean, like, we as a community do need to be a little bit better about being a little bit more specific with our advice.
yeah, and I also think it's hilarious too because like Gold League is a very specific type of StarCraft, and Um, like the amount of one base builds you see in Gold League is exponentially higher than anywhere else. Like the amount of one base openers or like one base like shenanigan openers or weird cannon rushes that aren't really cannon rushes, but like it's wild. It's wild out there. And I always try to keep that in mind because again, some of that stuff, once you understand it, is not that scary. But if you don't understand it and you're just honestly like trying to tread water, it is a lot and it's very
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming. So I always try to be aware of that and also just like like I can't tell you the variety of one base builds that exist in Gold League, and it kind of blows my mind sometimes. But yeah, they'll probably kill you a lot.
Yeah, it really is true. And it's something that once you get enough experience, like, you can stay on your own build order without even having to really worry about what the other person is doing, because what they're doing is not great. That's why they're in Gold League. But, if you continue, doing the things that you need to be doing to get better, like, at some point you're going to figure out, like, hey, this is bad. This is what I can do to, like, alleviate any risk, and then I'm going to go across the map and crush them while still staying on my build order. And that was one of the big things that I definitely learned in like kind of silver gold league. It's just like, hey, some people are going to do some crazy stuff, but if you stay calm and try to continue doing what you need to be doing, like you're going to win.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like, for like what resources you used when you were starting out, because for me, one of the things that was the most beneficial was I used to watch a lot of Winter's stream, and the angry coach where he looks at replays and like roasts you at the same time. That was so supremely helpful for me, because it it was players at my level making the regular macro mistakes that everyone makes at that level, but it was outlined in such a like Dedoy kind of obvious sort of way that like it taught me how to look at my own replays. You know, when it taught me to be like, okay, why are we getting a layer with with 25 drones? You know, like because I don't have the experience to ask myself that question. But when Winter goes on a 3 minute rant about how you can't afford anything with a layer on that kind of economy, like it sticks eventually. And like it really I can still sometimes hear Winter's voice in my head when I watch my own replays where it's like, "Oh, you thought that making 22 Zerglings was a good choice when you're you're down 15 drones? Okay." Like I can hear the snark sometimes in my head, but it's also like I think if you have no game knowledge, it can be really hard to look at your own replays and have prioritization and understand it, right? And um, you can look at your own replays and you can fixate on completely the not high priority things. You know, you could be like, oh, I got to get my creep spread out. Like, it's like, well, I mean, like, it's good to have it, but the big problem is that we're on 28 drones, right? And I think that's also just a very Gold League thing is that both players will like take two bases, but never go beyond 30, 32 drones or 32 workers. And they just keep fighting each other. And, you know, it goes on for 25 minutes, but, you know, that's pretty typical.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was first starting out, I was watching a lot of Husky StarCraft, um, which is that's an old name, but I would watch one of his series was called Ladder Anxiety, where he would literally just play a ladder game and like explain what he was doing, how he was feeling, what opponent could possibly be doing, and that kind of helped me learn to formulate or it helped me with scouting a lot for sure. And it's just like, okay, so Zergs will have something that looks like this by the time I start to scout. I also watched some of his casts, which were also very helpful, where he would explain a lot of the you know early game stuff, and he was pretty good at explaining all the stuff that was happening. Another thing that I watched was Total Biscuit getting into StarCraft 2, and I don't remember exactly when he was getting into. They might have been old videos when I was watching them, but I would watch him kind of like experiment with different stuff, and then like it was actually kind of weird to watch him like get more and more and more invested into StarCraft 2, like kind of almost
Yeah.
at a similar rate that I was getting invested into competitive StarCraft 2.
Yeah.
But those were extremely helpful, and eventually I just started kind of falling down the rabbit hole. Like I found that one Masters coach who was streaming on Twitch, and then realized, oh, I could watch other people on Twitch and see what they're doing with their Terran gameplay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, after that I've kind of fell down the rabbit hole. But I think Husky was like my initial just like, oh, okay, so this is how we play competitively.
Yeah. Well, I also think like it's always nice to watch a player who's more experienced than you with commentary because it tells you what they're thinking, right? And it tells you like their inner monologue of like, okay, if he's doing this, I should do this. If he's doing this, I'm not going to worry about it or whatever. Like, and because as a new player, there's so much information to take in. It's very challenging in that way. But having someone who's like, oh, okay, so this guy, he's doing this thing, so I'm gonna do this thing. Like hearing someone calmly explain that to you in the moment while it's happening, and in the moment while they're like seeing things really goes a long way. And it's a very advanced thing to learn, but just knowing that kind of decision tree takes a long time to develop that skill, you know?
Yeah, they're somebody who I know gets memed on a lot in the StarCraft 2 community is Vibe and his Bronze GM series, but I think it actually is a fairly helpful resource for people who are like initially getting into the game. Like the explanations that he gives for like bronze to gold are, they're fantastic. They're It's really well said. And it does kind of give you some insight of what you should be thinking about um during this time. Now, my opinion after gold is, well, you know, um, but I think it is a very helpful resource for people who are like just starting out. I think you should definitely check out uh, Vibe on Twitch if you haven't.
Yeah, no, I love bronze GM. I do agree that it does fall off at the higher you get. I think doing it, even the diamond stuff is a little like sometimes he does a lot of like really like high level reads because he
Hmm.
has high level scouting knowledge and he's like, oh, like he'll say something but it's like no, he's extrapolating like two steps ahead, which is a little questionable, but here's what I love about bronze GM and why I think it's fantastic is that everyone in StarCraft, who gives advice or commentary, and everyone who says like, "Oh, just macro better. Oh, just make workers. Oh, just have a build order." Like, that's fine and dandy, but the bronze to GM does the best job I've ever seen of someone showing you what it means to just macro better, right? Because he will do things where he will be like, oh, "Okay, this guy's he's taking a natural base. Cool. I'm gonna drone straight to 44 or something like that. And it's like as a like beginning player to see someone do that, I was blown away. And to see someone just make a bunch of roaches and just be like, all right, it's A move time. I'm just gonna A move the natural ramp, and he doesn't even look at it and wins the game. And seeing the power of that, and of course it's vibe, so he's like super chilled out and like just
Hmm.
describing it in like the most like nonchalant way and
Yep.
like he's just like, oh yeah, they're doing okay. We don't have to look at them. I'm sure they'll do fine at the natural. And it's like a hard wall with like tanks, and I'm like, there's no way he can't look at that. And then he just doesn't look at it, and he wins the game. And
We're A
again,
moving,
it's
then we're injecting, and we've won. Cool. Next game.
yeah, and it's such a good like show me as opposed to tell me. And I think that's something that should be very valued, something that shows you what macroing better looks like. Because when I watched it for the first time, and again, I was still pretty low league when I was first exposed to it, it was incredible. I do think Vibe plays very, very specifically to Vibe. He's a very greedy boy, so like it's very Vibe. But also being greedy in gold, yeah, who cares? You won't get punished. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason that I'm a little bit iffy on like, his plat and his diamond stuff is because he usually tells Terrence just like, yeah, just go mech. You should just be going mech. I'm like, I no. I will throw mech in every once in a while, but I'm a bio player till the day I
Yeah,
die.
yeah, yeah.
But there's not just Vibe. I mean, Vibe's a fantastic resource if you're just now, starting out, but you also have people like Winter who they've done Bronze to GM, but Winter put his own spin on it and limited his APM to a certain amount. So to show that just like
Yeah.
you can have 60 APM and compete in platinum. It's fine. You can have
Yeah.
100 APM and compete in diamond. Like you can do that. You just have to have, the right, the right reads and, have your macro be on point and, stuff like that. Even Neuro at one point was doing a bronze to GM, which his was a little bit more experimental and comedic, but I mean, it was still a helpful resource because it kind of just showed him like, you know, people are going to do really weird things in bronze to gold. People are going to make like
Yeah.
massive spine forests. So, you know, here's how opponents going to deal with that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like really good resources, probably more so than like when I started.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're very fortunate to have the people we have in our community, and there's plenty of resources for any kind of race or play style or whatever. I'm sure you can find something. Um, But it's also funny too when I look back on these lessons that I learned and the ones that are now become like so internalized. I don't even think about these things anymore. But there were people who told me to do these things, and it was a while ago. But I'm very grateful, and again, we're just very lucky to have them.
Yeah, I don't usually do this, but I do have to point out something that Helium Bunny said is like Bronze League Heroes was legitimately so helpful, and that was helpful to me too whenever Husky was doing it, and is
Yeah,
also fun and entertaining to watch whenever Winter's doing it, and also helpful because it kind of
yeah,
like highlights some of the strange things that happens in that league, and there was definitely a moment where I was just like, oh no, that's what I'm doing. I should stop that.
yeah. No, I think one of the things that just jumped in my mind is that when I was starting out, one of the things that's really annoying to deal with is the Reaper. And you just kind of freak out and like you lose all your lings and like you're scrambling to get queens to fight and stuff. But watching Bronze League Heroes told me that anytime in plat when I run into someone who's doing that, I'm already ahead because they've already missed like three buildings. If they're doing that, they've already ruined their build because there's no way they can do both. Like they just physically can't. So I would actually be like relieved sometimes when I saw someone try harding a Reaper because I'm like, I'm fine. Like, yeah, he might kill a tumor and annoy me, but like, I'm fine. And it was just funny because I would have never gotten that lesson without seeing like how bad it is for the Terran to do that. And Winter just like pointing at this guy who like hasn't put down a starport or something like that because he's microing a Reaper. But classic, it's classic.
Yeah, I try to take Winters like the Reaper as a cameraman
Oh, I love that.
advice to heart, but I did it a little bit differently than most people, and I would do at least a little bit of light harass with the Reaper, but also force myself to continue on with my build order, make sure that everything is still, you know, the like the macro machine is still rolling. So I
Yeah,
took his advice in a little bit different direction than he intended, but
yeah, yeah. No, it's all things in moderation.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I think that's what I have to say about Gold League is that really it's very scary and very terrifying, but I think you just need to making workers is great. Finding a build order that makes sense to you and gives you a solid plan, even if the plan is just I'm gonna max out. That's a great plan, and that's a great plan for Plat too. I think Plat it gets a little more complicated because you do have to respect your opponent more so than you do in Gold, where you can get bamboozled in plat and just straight up die to things. And I've been watching a lot of Ono's stream, and it's crazy how many you just how many things that you see and you go, oh, that's the first time I've ever seen that before, and like, you really can't prepare for it, like if you've never seen it before. And I think in plat, I certainly uh, learned very many different flavors of opponent, right? Like, oh, he's this type of Terran, or like, oh, he's this kind of Terran. Like it's very different, and you have to learn how to pick up on these things, and you have to learn how to deal with it as well, right? And uh, dealing with battle mech for the first time is a very different experience than dealing with the regular slow mech or whatever, and dealing with a you know like a one upgrade Terran is a very different experience than dealing with like the standard like three base CC macro Terran, right? Like I kind of make fun of it, but like the one NG Bay is such a type. Like if I check his upgrades and he just has +1, I'm just like, okay, I kind of know what to expect for how this game is going to like develop just because of like he's making a statement with this. But as a beginning player, you don't know that he's making a statement with that, right? But um, for me, I think it was challenging because again, all of this stuff is new. But the thing that really helped me is just like I did this the most in plat as like new experience is just like looking at my opponent's build and being like, why does he have this much stuff right now? Like because it wouldn't make sense to me because I would be like, I'm pretty safe, and then I'm just not.
I still
And
do that in Diamond, to be honest.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, like I do it more quickly in Diamond because
Yeah.
I've seen the outline before, but like Plat, I'm like literally like, why is this hitting so hard and so quickly? Like it doesn't make sense to me. And then, you know, with experience, you're like, oh, okay, he doesn't have an armor upgrade. He has no starport or something like that, like something obscene like that. And you're like, oh, like this is the entire push, right? And you really don't have the ability to think of that in the game if you're not experienced and you haven't seen it before. But if you do, you're like, oh, if I hold this, even if I lose, you know, 15 drones, I'm fine, you know, and just um, learning these things, I think, really helps you learn the game state, um, because it's hard. It's hard in platinum. I really do think that. I do think that the build order is still the king and still at the top as far as like it comes down to your execution and your ability to execute it. But you still have to uh, learn the flavors, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Usually what I tell people is just to find kind of a basic build order, which, that's going to be different from race to race because, if I were to tell, like a silver or gold league Terran, just like learn your 111. That's all I want you to do is just learn your 111, which like you basically learn the backbone of most other builds.
Yeah.
Um, you tell Zergs like, hey, get your 16 hatch, your 18 pool, and then your 17 or no, I messed that up.
All right.
Uh,
No one's ranking on this one. That's okay. We'll
yeah,
unrank.
I'm technically plat Zerg anyways, so um, but yeah, it's just give them something basic that they can build off of. I found that's actually what I found the most helpful is just like I didn't like there would be massive build orders where you go into like 100 supply, and I was just like I can't memorize all that. I just can't do it. So one of the things that the person who was coaching me told me is just like, yeah, just learn up to like 46 supply. You just learn this build order up to 46 supply, and this will kind of be a point where you can like branch out and do other things whenever you feel comfortable, but just make sure that you have that much. And then after that, just make sure you're making workers, making army, making production facilities. And as you climb, then you can learn more about like, okay, so now I want to add these racks at this time. I want to add another factory at this time, and so on and so forth. That's what I found to be most helpful.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about getting that foundation, especially like the earliest part of the game, like the earliest part of the game, getting that down like cleanly is very important for everything else to follow. And I think Terran is cool because you also, you know, if you get a 111, you can tailor that once you get more experienced and once you can do a little bit more like plug and play, like add-on swapping, just for the environment or the
You wind
situation
up
you're in.
tailoring it a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also like that's really fantastic, but it's also you have to get those pieces down independently first
Yep.
before you can start freestyling it, right? And this is another thing that I see a lot in platinum is that having a plan goes a long way because
Oh
I
yeah.
think there's a lot of it's kind of the thing you were saying earlier about the 211 where it's like I execute the 211 and then I don't know like there's no plan, right? And it doesn't even have to be that set in stone. It can be like, okay, we're gonna do 211, then we're gonna get our production, then we're gonna try a push or something like that, you know, or it's like we're gonna try to get this supply and then we'll try a push, right? um, for me, my plan was simple. My plan was just, hey, we're gonna get this many drones if we can, and then we're gonna just nonstop make units, hope for the best, get our upgrades, and don't forget any of the important ones and go for it. You know, and that's a very simple plan. But having any plan at all is it 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 gives you so much control as far as um, finding your way through plat because I do think a lot of the times you'll see players in plat who will um, get to a good position or get to a have a really good early game, but then they just kind of sort of like flounder around kind of back and forth like, oh, should I do this, should I do this, maybe I should do this, maybe I should expand, maybe I should attack. But it's like if you had a plan where it's just like, yeah, and then I attack at this time, like it even if it doesn't go great and it won't go great all the time, having that plan gives you such an advantage over your opponent, right?
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I feel like just having a plan, even in like bronze and silver league, is incredibly important. But it'll probably be a more basic plan. It's just like, hey, max out and then push across. That's
Yeah,
all I want you to do. Is just like if you just make a 200 Marines, I'm fine with that. I don't care, but make sure that you have 200 out of 200 supply and then push out. And then you can start to kind of build on top of that. And by the time you hit platinum, it's just like, all right, hit it this timing with this much supply, and you'll probably just roll over some of these ladder opponents.
yeah. Well, I think in gold too. I kind of forgot to say this is that gold players have a tendency to like get to like 120 to 140 supply, and then just like it's nonstop fighting, and and then the game never progresses beyond that because it's two players just kind of bashing into each other over and over again. And look, I get it. I get you want to like look at the fight, and I totally understand. But it's also like if you just like said, okay, we're fighting, but I'm still trying to max out, like that will win you so many games in gold. Just hitting the max and hitting it so strong like that. It's fantastic. Um,
I actually have a funny story about that. When I was in Gold League, we I played a TVT, and this was, or no, was this in Heart of the Swarm or Legacy of the Void? It was in one of the two, but it was 45 minutes of old Blizzard time, so like 30-35 minutes real time. And it was one of those games where we made every single unit because we were just experimenting. We didn't quite know what was going on in the game,
yeah,
but damn it, we're going to make everything.
yeah,
Like at one point we were nuking each other. There were battle cruisers fighting in the sky. There were Vikings doing stuff. Bio forces engaging each other. Like it was genuinely a crazy game. But at some point, like at the 45-minute mark, I just won because I kept making stuff. And I kept making sure
yeah,
that I had enough workers, and that I was, taking other bases, and the other opponent just didn't. Like it,
yeah.
it like that was is genuinely a memory that's probably going to stand out to me for the rest of my life. It's just like the Noah's Ark of TVT.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's also just I did a YouTube video on this, so like this is a seamless plug, but I did a video where I basically just reflect upon like a game that I remember from Gold League that I made a massive comeback, and like it was an incredible high that like I have never reached at the same level of comeback hype. Like it's those kind of games are the ones that really they really fuel the passion, and they really inspire me to keep going and to keep improving. And yeah, it was a memory. It was a great memory of supremely macroing better than my opponent and coming back from a terrible spot. And
Yeah.
it's great.
No, yeah, that game inspired me too, but I had to take that inspiration into the next day because I was just tired after that game.
Yeah, yeah. No, so this is a story that I just wanted to say, and I think the message here is that like if you're trying ladder, it's you gotta get the ego aside. You gotta accept that you're gonna lose a lot, and you will lose a lot. I mean, that's part of it. But you really just have to just be able to take a critical look at your own gameplay, and I think that's a very big challenge. But it's something to practice, and so this is a story I think about all the time because it it kind of blows my mind. But I was in Marmelo's stream, and someone sent a message to her like, "Hey, I'm a gold Protoss. I'm wondering if you have any tips or anything that would help me get out of gold league." And Marms, being great as she is, she was just like, "Oh, hey, like, I would try to find a build order. I would try to focus on, making probes, taking bases, and just really sticking to that build order and kind of just working from there." And I kid you not, this Twitch chatter replied back in chat. He typed these words out. He said, "Actually, my macro's pretty good. So thanks for the advice, but my macro's fine, but I appreciate it."
Oh my god.
I was
I
I was
know.
floored. I was floored. I
Hang on now. My macro is crap. As a diamond leaguer, I'm going to be upfront. I'm going to go ahead and say it. My macro is crap compared to, like a masters or grandmasters player. So the audacity of this gold leaguer. Oh
I
my
just it was
god.
one of the most hilarious things I've ever read in a Twitch chat. And I hope I hope he's doing all right. I hope he's taking a hard look at his own replays. But it's just yeah, you just be prepared to critique yourself, and it's challenging. Don't get me wrong. Like sometimes it's easy to beat yourself up, but uh, you gotta take a critical look at yourself sometimes. And the replay is a beautiful thing because the replay does a great job of outlining every choice you've made and preserving it for all of time for you to look at and appreciate. And I know this is like a brutal thing to do in Gold League, but try it. If just look at your just look at when your layer finishes and then look at how much time it takes for you to get a layer upgrade after it's finished. And just stare at the game timer, and you'd be amazed at how much time elapses. Because in your head, I know I did this. In my head, I was like, yeah, I get roach speed right when my layer finishes every time. But then when I look at the replay, there's like 45 seconds to a minute and a half where I have a layer done and I haven't done anything with it, right? And without the replay, it's hard to get that, but man, it's tough. It's tough sometimes.
Yeah, I for new players I encourage them to not hit score screen whenever a match is over and hit the rewind button. Like
Yep.
regardless if you're going to look at the replay, just every single time hit the rewind button. Kind of get yourself into the habit of like, if you want to look over a replay, then the replay is already loaded for you.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna have a little bit of a moment here, but it's just like back in my day, we didn't have the rewind button. We had to go back into the replay section and then have to select our replay and then boot it back up. We didn't get this
Mm.
fancy tech. But
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
I'm
serious
spoiled.
in all seriousness, like do go back and, hit the rewind button and just like take a look at all of this stuff like Captain Happa said, like the layer timing is incredibly important, and making sure that you are getting the upgrades that you need. I still go back and look at my replays and realize like, oh shoot, my 3-3 is like a minute late, so that's maybe something I need to think about for the next game.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is really challenging in Plat is gaining this game understanding and getting this game sense to where you can accurately say, okay, I'm ahead or okay, I'm behind. Because knowing that influences so much of your decision making. And I think one of the things that's one of the most important things you can do when you're looking at a replay is to double check your thought process and to double check your game awareness. And you can be like, okay, I got Hellbat attacked, and I cleaned it up, and I thought I was ahead afterwards, right? And then you go to that point in the replay after the attack has been cleaned up and you say, was I ahead? Yes or no? And I think checking that really helps develop that kind of game sense and develop that, oh, I think I'm ahead. Oh, I think I'm behind. Or how do I tell if I'm behind? How do I tell if I'm ahead? Because again, those states, whether you're ahead or behind, dictates the choices you need to make. And it's a hard skill to develop because it's not a knowledge thing, it's a situational thing, right? And it's a situational thing that is always changing and always weird, always weird and unexpected. And um, the the other thing I always did is that if I was getting timing attacked or aggressively pushed in some way, I just go back to the replay. I just pause it when he leaves his base, and I'm just be like, okay, he's leaving at this time, and what does he have when he's leaving? Because that just kind of tells you where you're kind of at roughly. And again, it's a game sense thing, and it's a uh, you got to feel it out kind of thing, and it's a tough skill.
Yeah, it is an incredibly tough skill. um One of the things that I did want to say about double checking where you were mentally at each stage of the game. I actually wish that I had started streaming way before I did start streaming, because even to this day sometimes I will go back to like, you know, a week old stream and just look at what my thought process was for a game. Like where did I think I was in the game? If I'm verbalizing it, whenever I'm streaming, and then go back in the replay and check to see if I was right during those times and see if, I was like correcting my assessments. And the surprising thing is that I'm not super accurate. Like even sometimes after a game, it's just like, oh well, I thought he had less drones than that, and I go back and I watch all that stuff. I'm like, ah, he was on 80 drones, so you're completely wrong.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's kind
And
of
it's good. I think it's also good to take those shots in the dark and just be like, I thought I was ahead. And it's like, well, no, you're wrong because of this.
yeah.
Or it's
Be
like you have to be wrong a bunch of times before you get a good game sense within yourself, you know? And you just got to guess sometimes. And sometimes you're like, oh, I think I'm ahead. Let's do this. And you do it. And then you lose because you were behind or whatever. Or like the same thing, vice versa, you know?
yeah. It definitely helps to know like if the shots that you're making are right and wrong in the replay. But yeah, sometimes you do have to like kind of take a risk and just be like, oh well, I'm based on the information that I've been giving. Opponent's not going to push out and attack me. And sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and it does genuinely help. Build up game sense. I know it helped me whenever I was like going through gold leagues and like actually started watching my own replays and then realizing like, oh, I wasn't actually ahead. Or like I know that this Protoss player is literally walking one Colossus across the map at a time and I'm killing them, but he is also up 3 bases to me, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to lose.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's hilarious too because now that I have a decent game sense for the most part, I get to do things that I know I'm behind and I know what I'm doing is the wrong move for someone's behind, but I also know it is my only chance to get back into this game. So I am doing the wrong thing and just like praying that like I don't get attacked or something like that. Like I know I'm behind, but I'm like if I just drone and he just like doesn't do anything, I can get back in this. So it's like this weird like advanced like layering or whatever, but it's hilarious that you get that freedom once you have a good understanding, and you can do a lot of stuff blind, and you can do a lot of stuff, yeah, for the Hail Mary, for the last hurrah, you can really apply yourself if you know where you are in the game.
Yeah, for sure. But like in order to start getting or being able to make some of those calls, like you have to start as soon as possible. Like you have to start watching your replays and realizing where you were right, where were you wrong. Like being able being able to tune in some of those things is such an incredible advantage to have in StarCraft 2. And the earlier you can start it, like I genuinely think the faster you can climb with in conjunction with, being able to, do your macro properly and realizing what your mistakes are whenever you're, in your games. I think you can very quickly climb. And when I started realizing my mistakes in Gold League, like I soared to platinum. It was
Yeah,
like I think I spent less time in Gold League than I did any other league.
yeah, yeah. And oh, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, and like if you think about like one game, like if you play one game, you can test your game sense probably like 3 or 4 to 5 times within that game. Just I think it's also a very Zerg thing sometimes where you're constantly going back and forth between drones and units, and each one of those like forks in the road is a critical like, hey, I made drones here. Was this a good call or a bad call? Or hey, I made units here. Was this a good call or a bad call? And like for me, each of those like little decisions just overall added up to me eventually having a good idea where I am in the game. I'm not right all the time, but like I have a gist. I have a gist of where things should be.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're running up on about an hour and 45 minutes here. Captain Happa, do you have any other thoughts on the topic? Any other maybe stories you want to share or how you kind of busted through platinum into diamond?
Um, I mean, I think it's very fun, and I think the thing I miss a lot about the lower leagues is how much the improvement was leaps and bounds. And I still really love StarCraft, but here's the fun yet bummer news is that as you get higher and higher, it's honestly it's the same stuff. It's just way more precise. Like I'm doing the same things but I'm just doing them at a elevated level. Like I'm making the same mistakes, but I'm doing them at a similar yet different level, and where there's like I have opponents that are more capable of punishing those, right? And it's just all these little tiny fine tuning things, and um, it's the never ending ride of fix one thing, create new problems, fix one of those things, create a few more new things to fix, and um, I mean I still really enjoy it and I love it, and it just gets more complicated, but it's so much fun, man. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it really is. I mean,
Um,
there's other things about, Diamond League that can, also be fun. There some
yeah.
of the like tuning things are, they can be very uh what's the word? I mean, it could definitely fire off the dopamine. Like sometimes whenever I'm like tweaking some of my builds and they start to work, I'm just like, oh my god, this is fantastic. And it's not really something I could get away with very well in like gold and platinum. So I think there are still some really fun things about diamond, and there's a lot of things that you can look forward to if you're in those lower leagues.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, as you gain experience and as you gain knowledge, it's also like I'm kind of like I've been in Ono's stream a lot, and I'm like, she's been improving a lot, and it's a fantastic stream, but she's been improving a lot. But it's also like sometimes I go into that stream and I'm like, congratulations, you're now good enough that you have to learn this thing. Or it was like, or like I see a mistake that it's a repeated mistake or something like that, and I'm like, um, okay, well, I didn't say nothing about this when you were in gold, but now you're in plat, so I'm gonna say this, and this is now a thing you have to do. Like it's because of the growth, right? I wouldn't add more unless there was already like a development base, but it's just funny because I'm like, yeah, this thing that I told you not to worry about, you have to worry about it now.
Yeah.
And that just keeps going. That keeps going for a while too. So it's just funny.
Yeah, your opponents are actually going to hit at a certain time now, so we got to actually be ready for those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say on the topic is yeah, bronze to plat was a wild time for me. We rose to the ranks fairly quickly, and honestly, I'm hoping to continue going through the ranks. I'm going to be here continuing to fine tune things and figure out what I'm doing wrong. And hopefully in the future, like the climb will be, masters and below rather than diamond and below.
Oh yeah, we'll change the title eventually. Don't worry. We'll get there.
Welcome to the climb, the StarCraft 2 podcast for the white collar worker.
Yeah, exactly. Once we get to the top of the mountain, we're gonna do a whole rebrand. All right.
We'll bring on special guests like Lambo, Hearthstone, and
Yeah, me and
Clem.
Lambo will be best friends.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming out. This has been a rather fun episode and a real trip down memory lane. It's real. It's
Yes.
actually been a
J-
blast.
I just want to say one thing is that if you're laddering at all, if you're laddering at all, whether it's in gold or silver, plat or bronze or diamond or masters or whatever, like good job. Like it's rough out there, and it's definitely a challenge, and I salute anyone who's given it a shot. Even if you play one game a month and you just lose or whatever, hey, good work.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good way to send us off. So, guys, I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of links in chat. Check out Dan. His link tree is now in the chat. He has fantastic YouTube content. His Twitch stream is a blast to be in. You could definitely go and redeem a praise Serral or, the Italian. Go have Rainer drink a couple of Red Bulls in the stream. I mean, fantastic stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and put my socials in there. I'm still trying to get a better schedule going, but it's going to be a little bit touch and go for a little while. But yep, follow me on Twitter. I have a YouTube channel. The Climb VODs will be going there. Speaking of which, the Climb. is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the VODs will be uploaded to YouTube. Usually a week afterwards. We'll have to see because this is going to be a long one to edit. But yeah, Dan, thank you so much for coming out here and helping me host this thing. It's been an honor and a pleasure as always.
Oh yeah, always love doing the show. Love having these chats, and it's always a good time. You always say really nice things about me too, so I appreciate that. And thanks for being here.
Yeah. All right, guys. That's going to be it for us. Good luck, have fun on the ladder, and we will see you in the next episode. Take care. Good